I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, spilling everything in a post like this, but here I am. My name's Mike, and I've been with my wife, Lisa, for about 7 years now. When we first got together, she was the kind of girl who seemed perfect, fun, smart, confident, and undeniably beautiful. I was crazy about her. We got married 2 years ago, and for a while, everything looked great on the surface. But then little things started creeping in: her late nights, her secretive phone calls, her sudden irritability. Nothing concrete, just enough to make me suspicious. I figured maybe I was just overthinking, or maybe she was stressed about work or something. Still, deep down, I felt these tiny alarms going off. Lately, there were signs I couldn't ignore. She'd come home smelling different sometimes, like perfume I didn't recognize, or she'd be unusually defensive when I asked her where she'd been. She'd brush it off with some bullshit excuse about a coworker or a late client. I didn't want to believe it, but the gut feeling kept gnawing at me. Then came the night I found out for sure, an evening that turned my world upside down. It happened unexpectedly. I was out of town on a business trip, and Lisa was supposed to be home alone, relaxing. But I'd been getting these weird hunches, so I decided to do a little digging. I didn't want to go full stalker, but I just wanted to see if there was anything out of the ordinary. I hacked into her email, her social media. Nothing concrete there, just the usual lies and excuses she'd throw out when I pressed. But then I remembered she'd mentioned a hotel meeting with some client that same night. I never liked that place, but I figured, okay, maybe she's just working late. Later that night, I got desperate. I remembered she'd mentioned some conference downtown, so I looked up the hotel she said she was at. I had no reason to suspect anything at first, but then I remembered a snippet of conversation she had the day before about a big opportunity with the investor she'd been talking about for weeks. That investor's name was Mark, and she kept saying how excited she was about the funding. But I'd been dismissive because I was busy with my startup, trying to get my own shit off the ground. Still, something about the way she said it made me uneasy. I decided to check the hotel's security footage, thinking maybe I could catch her sneaking in or out, or, God forbid, something worse. When I finally got access, I couldn't believe what I saw. It was her, Lisa, walking into the hotel lobby with Mark, the investor. But that wasn't what made my stomach drop. No, it was the way she was clinging to him, laughing way too close, leaning in, her hand resting on his chest as if they were more than just business partners. And then I saw them heading to a room together. That was the moment I knew she'd been lying all along. She'd been cheating on me with Mark. Not just some fling, but a full-blown affair. And the worst part, this was right before the funding deal was supposed to close. I'm talking about her trying to secure my startup seed money, knowing full well she was screwing some investor behind my back. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly, over and over, all while pretending to be the loving wife? I thought I knew. After I saw that footage, I was a mess. My mind raced. I kept replaying the scenes in my head, trying to understand how I missed all the signs, how I was so blind to her manipulation. The betrayal cut deep. I'd trusted her more than anyone, and she turned out to be just another scheming bitch. I was furious, but I also felt this crushing sadness. All those years, all that trust, wasted. And now, it was like everything I built with her was just a lie. I didn't sleep all night, just sitting there with my phone, numb and sick to my stomach. I was at a crossroads: confront her or just cut it all off and walk away. The next day, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I knew I couldn't keep pretending nothing was wrong. I had to face her. But I also knew I couldn't just let her get away with it. I had to come up with a plan, something cold, calculated, and effective. I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. That's when I started thinking about revenge, about making her see what she lost. But I'll tell you, the hardest part was figuring out how to do it without just losing what little respect I still had for myself. That's where I'm at now, figuring out my next move, and honestly, it's not pretty. I didn't want to rush into anything after I saw the footage. I needed to think. I sat there for hours, replaying everything in my head, trying to piece it all together. How long had she been cheating? Was it just that night, or had she been playing me for months? For the first time in years, I felt completely powerless. I had trusted her with my life, my hopes, my dreams, only to find out she'd been lying to my face every step of the way. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I couldn't do it blindly. I had to come prepared. I started planning my approach, and honestly, my mind kept racing between wanting to crush her and wanting to understand why she did it. I wasn't exactly naive. I knew Lisa was a bitch, but I never thought she'd cheat on me with someone like Mark, especially during the most crucial part of my startup funding. That was the final straw. I waited until she got home that evening. I wanted her to think everything was normal to let her walk into my trap. When she finally came through the door, she was acting like everything was fine, smirking, acting flirtatious as if she knew she'd gotten away with something. I could see that spark in her eyes, that smugness. It made my blood boil. I didn't say a word at first. I just watched her, studied her, trying to gauge her next move. Then I told her I knew about the hotel, about Mark, about everything. Her reaction was instant. She looked surprised, then irritated. "What are you talking about, Mike? You're crazy," she snapped, crossing her arms and giving me that bitchy glare. I pressed her harder, showing her the footage I had saved on my phone. Her face twisted, anger, shock, and a hint of panic all rolled into one. Her lies started coming out fast. She claimed it was just business, that Mark was helping her with some big opportunity for the startup. She said I was overreacting, that I was paranoid because I was insecure. She dismissed it as just sex, nothing more. Yeah, right, I didn't buy it. I knew her too well. She's the type to lie repeatedly, to spin stories to cover her tracks. But this wasn't just about her cheating, it was about her actively betraying me during the one thing I cared about, my business, my dreams. That realization hit hardest. I felt a mix of rage and heartbreak. How could she have lied so blatantly? And for what? A quick fuck. A shot at some extra money. It all seemed so petty now. I asked her if there was anyone else, if this was just some one-time thing or if she'd been doing this for months. She tried to deny it, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. She kept insisting she loved me, that it was just a stupid mistake, that she didn't mean for it to happen. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. Honestly, I was devastated, more than I'd ever been. I'd given her everything. I supported her through her startup chaos, worked my ass off to build something of my own. And this was how she repaid me, by screwing around with the investor I'd been negotiating with for months. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. I was staring at the woman I thought I knew, realizing she'd been lying to me the entire time. And the worst part, she didn't even seem sorry, just angry that I found out. That's when I knew I had to do something drastic. I spent the next few days trying to process everything. I told myself I'd give her a chance to come clean, to own up to what she'd done. But I also knew I couldn't trust her anymore. The betrayal ran too deep. I started formulating my revenge, figuring out how to make her feel the pain she'd caused me. Not just emotionally, but in a way that she'd never forget. It was going to be cold, calculated, and merciless. I didn't want her to walk away like nothing happened. I wanted her to see what she'd lost, what she threw away for a quick fuck. There's a strange feeling of clarity that comes with betrayal. It's like everything you believed in crumbles in an instant and you're left staring at the wreckage. That's where I was now. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going down without a fight. I was going to make her regret crossing me. I just didn't know yet how exactly I'd do that, but I'd figure it out. Because, at the end of the day, I refused to be a fool who lets her walk all over me. After that confrontation, everything changed. I started digging into her phone, her email, her social media, whatever I could get my hands on. I needed leverage proof, something concrete to tie her to Mark beyond just that hotel footage. I wasn't planning to just yell and storm out. No, I wanted her to see that I knew everything, that I had the upper hand now. That's when I found the texts, the messages she'd been hiding. She'd been texting Mark daily, not just about business, but about meeting up secretly. I saw the explicit messages, how she called him hot, how she wanted to see him again, how she loved the thrill of sneaking around. She even mentioned how she loved the way he touched her, how he made her feel alive. God, reading those messages made my stomach turn. It was like I was reading about some stranger, not my wife. I couldn't believe I'd been blind for so long. How could she have lied to me for months, pretending to be the perfect partner, the loving wife. The worst part was realizing I'd been played. She used me, my trust, my ambitions, and now she was out there screwing some guy who was only interested in her because she was a pretty face with a quick mouth. I felt a mix of anger, disgust, and heartbreak. That afternoon, I went into full detective mode, tracing her calls, her bank transactions, trying to understand the full scope of her betrayal. It was like peeling an onion, each layer revealing more lies and more pain. One thing that really hit me hard was a message she sent Mark after their hotel encounter. She told him she'd been thinking about him all day, that she needed him, and that she wanted to see him again soon. I saw the timestamp, just a few hours before she was supposed to meet with the investor at the conference. That's when I realized how much she'd been juggling her lies, playing the part of a loyal wife while sneaking off to get her rocks off with some guy. That was the moment I knew I had to act, not just for my pride but for my own sanity. I decided I couldn't confront her directly without some sort of backup. I wanted her to realize I wasn't just some naive guy who got cheated on. I wanted her to see that I was capable of ending everything with a single move. I started planning how to expose her in front of everyone, her friends, her family, her colleagues. I knew I had to make her see that her lies and her cheating had consequences, and I wanted her to feel the humiliation she'd put me through, multiplied by 10. I also started thinking about her startup. I knew she'd been banking on Mark's funding, and I wondered how much of that was rooted in her lies. I found out she'd actually been using some of that fake confidence to secure investments from other people, lying her way through meetings, pretending she had everything under control. It was infuriating how she'd thrown herself into her career, only to sabotage it with her lies. I knew that if I played my cards right, I could ruin her reputation, make her lose everything she'd been chasing. But even with all this planning, my mind kept circling back to her, to Lisa's bitchiness, her lies, her constant gaslighting. She had this way of twisting everything around, making herself the victim in every argument. It was exhausting. I remember her telling me one night during an argument, "You're just insecure," or "You're overreacting." She loved playing the victim, acting like I was the crazy one for suspecting anything. That's what made her so dangerous, her ability to lie so smoothly, to deny everything even when the evidence was right in front of her face. Now, I was starting to see her for what she really was, an opportunist, a liar, a cheat. But I wasn't going to let her walk away with it. I was planning my move, slow and deliberate. I wanted to ruin her world just enough so she'd understand the pain she caused me. I wasn't just settling for a breakup. I wanted her to pay, to feel the same crushing betrayal I felt when I watched that footage and read those texts. Honestly, I've never felt more alive and more dead at the same time. This whole situation has turned my life into a complete mess, but I also realize I'm not going down without a fight. I'm going to make her see that her actions have consequences, that she can't lie and cheat her way through life and expect to get away with it. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but I'm working on it. And I promise, she's going to regret ever crossing me. By the time I had all the evidence I needed, I was simmering with a mix of fury and cold calculation. I knew I couldn't just confront her outright anymore. I needed a plan, something precise that would hit her where it hurt the most. I spent nights awake, thinking about how to turn her own lies against her, how to make her realize she'd lost control entirely. The first move was to make her think I didn't know the full extent of her betrayal. I wanted her to feel safe, to let her drop her guard. I started acting like everything was normal, asking about her day, pretending I hadn't seen the messages or the footage. Meanwhile, I was meticulously gathering more intel, waiting for the right moment. I knew she was the type to double down on her lies when cornered, so I had to be smarter. I started planting small seeds of doubt in her mind, acting as if I was still clueless but suspicious, just enough to make her paranoid. I also reached out to Mark. I didn't threaten him or make any accusations outright, but I did leave a few subtle hints, letting him know I knew exactly what was going on. I told him I'd be watching, that I'd been gathering info. That kind of quiet, deliberate intimidation, more effective than yelling or threats. Mark was a coward, I could tell, and the last thing he wanted was a fight with someone who knew his dirty little secret. Meanwhile, I made sure to keep a close eye on Lisa, watching her every move. I noticed she started acting even more bitchy and defensive. She'd snap at me for the smallest thing, trying to make me seem like the crazy one. But I didn't bite. I simply played along, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I knew her pattern. She'd try to deny everything, then spin some story to save her ass. I wasn't going to give her that chance. One evening, I set the trap. I told her I knew about her texts with Mark, about the hotel, about everything. I told her I had enough proof to ruin her career, her reputation, everything she cared about. Her face went pale for a second, then she started yelling, calling me psycho, jealous, and paranoid. She tried to brush it off to make me feel like I was overreacting. But I just sat there, calm and quiet, watching her crumble under the weight of her lies. That was when she snapped. She started crying, fake tears, trying to look innocent. She screamed at me, "You're just insecure. You're just jealous because I'm better than you at everything." That was her favorite line, a classic gaslighting move. I could see through it, but I let her run her mouth. I knew I had her cornered now. Her words were empty, her tears fake, and her entire act was crumbling faster than she realized. I told her I was done playing her game. I said I was going to expose her to everyone, her friends, her family, her colleagues. I wanted her to feel what it was like to be humiliated, to lose everything she'd been chasing. I knew the timing had to be perfect. I didn't want her to get wind of what I was planning until I was ready. There was no turning back now. I was all in. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I had all the ammunition I needed. The pieces of her deception were in place, and I was ready to take her down. The thing about betrayal, especially so deep and so personal, is that it strips you of your sense of trust. I'd been her fool for years, and now I was about to make her regret the day she ever crossed me. But I also knew this would change everything. Nothing would go back to how it was, not that I wanted it to. I was tired of her lies, her manipulations, her bitchy attitude. I wanted her to see that I wasn't some naive idiot anymore. I was done being played. Now I was going to be the one in control. And trust me, she would regret ever trying to screw me over, because I was about to make sure she felt every ounce of pain she'd caused. The day I finally decided to execute my plan, I felt calm in a way I hadn't in years. I had everything lined up, screenshots of her texts, the hotel footage, the bank transactions that proved she'd been cashing in on her affair. I'd been meticulous. This wasn't about just blowing up her life out of rage, but about making her really understand what she'd lost. I wanted her to feel vulnerable for once, to see that her lies had consequences. I set everything into motion early that morning. I called her boss, her best friend, and even a few of her family members. None of this was malicious, but it was meant to make her realize that her world was about to come crashing down. I didn't give her time to spin her stories or come up with more lies. I just dropped the truth in a calm, calculated way. I told her I had proof she'd been unfaithful, that I knew about the affair, and that I was done pretending everything was okay. Her reaction, classic, she freaked out, started screaming that I was insane, that I was ruining her life, calling me jealous and paranoid. She tried to deny everything, but I had her cornered. The look in her eyes, desperation mixed with fury, made me realize how deeply she'd betrayed me. She started crying, but not because she was sorry. It was more like she was trying to manipulate me into backing down. I told her that I'd had enough, that I was filing for divorce, that I was going to expose her to everyone she cared about, and that she'd never get away with lying to me again. I made sure she understood I wasn't bluffing, that the next steps were in motion, and there was no turning back. She tried to plead, to cry, to make some kind of apology, but it was too late. The damage was done. I'd already gathered enough to obliterate her reputation if I wanted to. In the hours that followed, I watched her crumble. She went from a smug, bitchy wife to a frantic mess. She accused me of stalking, of trying to ruin her life out of jealousy, classic gaslighting. But I just looked at her, cold and steady, knowing that the truth was out there and I had control of the situation now. I didn't bother arguing with her anymore. I knew she'd try to spin her stories, deny everything, and manipulate her way out of it. But I had the proof, and I was ready to make her face the consequences. That evening, I sat alone, feeling a strange mix of relief and emptiness. It was like I'd finally taken the mask off, and I saw her for what she really was, an opportunist, a liar, a cheat. And now I was going to make her feel the full weight of her betrayal. I knew this wasn't just about her cheating. This was about her disrespecting everything I worked for, everything I believed in. And I was done playing nice. The worst part, I knew this would change everything between us. I didn't want her back, and I didn't want her to think she could manipulate her way out of this. I was ready to cut her loose, to start over, but I also knew I'd never forget the shock of discovering her deceit. That feeling of betrayal, cold, raw, and unforgiving, would stay with me forever. But at least now I had the upper hand. I'd finally taken control, and her lies couldn't hide from the truth anymore. In the days that followed, everything moved rapidly. I went through the formalities, lawyers, divorce papers, the process of severing all ties. She tried to call me, text me, even show up at my place, but I kept my distance. Every time I saw her, there was this look in her eyes, part anger, part desperation, like she couldn't believe she'd been exposed so thoroughly. And honestly, I didn't feel any guilt about it. I'd given her every chance to be honest, to fix things, but she chose her lies over me. I decided to let her feel the full weight of what she threw away, but I also knew I couldn't let this consume me. I had my startup to rebuild, something I'd almost lost because of her betrayal. The trust I once had in her is gone forever, replaced by a bitter lesson about manipulation and the importance of reading the warning signs early. I realize that sometimes people are just who they show you they are, no matter how much you want to believe otherwise. Looking back, I've learned a lot. Never ignore the small signs. Never dismiss your gut feelings. And most importantly, never let someone use you for their gain, whether it's in love, business, or trust. Because when betrayal hits this hard, it leaves scars you carry for a long time. But I also learned that you can rebuild, better, stronger, more cautious. You just have to accept that some people are not worth your pain, no matter how much you loved them. So I moved on. I focused on my business, my own mental health, and making sure I never let anyone manipulate me again. I still think about Lisa sometimes, about how she lied and cheated her way through everything we had. But now, I see her for what she really was, someone who thought she could get away with anything. The truth is, she lost my respect a long time ago, and I'm finally at a point where I can breathe again, knowing I didn't let her ruin me. If there's one thing I can tell anyone reading this, trust your instincts. When you see the signs, don't ignore them. Confront if you have to, but don't let betrayal slide just because you want to believe the best. Because sometimes the best thing you can do is cut ties, walk away, and rebuild yourself from the ground up. That's what I did. And honestly, I feel stronger for it. The pain will fade, but the lessons stay. And now I know my worth.